깜짝이.
All right. So, quick survey. How many of you had heard of Zappos prior to this? Okay, very cool. So before getting started, wanted to talk a little bit about what led me to Zappos. And the story actually begins with pizza. In college, I was running a pizza business on the ground floor of my dormitory. We had about, 300 or 400 students living in the dormitory, and my roommate and I had a pizza business, and we were ordering from suppliers, we were setting the menu, we were hiring workers, and occasionally I was making the pizzas myself as well. And this guy named Alfred would stop by every night and order a large pepperoni pizza from me. And Alfred's actually our CFO and COO today at Zappos. And I remember thinking that that wasn't that surprising, because I remember in college we would go out late at night, there would be 10 of us at a restaurant, and after a long night of partying, we would go eat, and Alfred would literally finish everyone's leftovers. Whatever they didn't finish, he would eat. So we had nicknames for him. We called him Human Trash Compactor, or sometimes just Monster. And so when he ordered a pizza every night, it wasn't that strange or surprising, but sometimes he would come back a few hours later and order another large pizza from us. And I thought to myself, oh, he is really hungry, he really can eat. Well, I found out several years later, Alfred was actually taking the pizzas upstairs and selling them off by the slice, one slice at a time, for a profit. So I guess that's why he's our CFO and COO today at Zappos. And I think he's speaking at 11:30, so you can ask him about the pizza later. So after the pizza business, the same roommate that I was running the pizza business with, he and I started a company called Link Exchange. We did online advertising, and this is actually, it's a little hard to see, but this is actually the logo that we had. It was LE for Link Exchange, and we had 1 million different websites in our network, and we actually ended up eventually selling the company to Microsoft. We grew the company from 0 employees to about 100 or so employees. And, but what a lot of people don't know is the reason why we actually ended up selling the company, and it's because the company was a lot of fun in the beginning, and then the company culture just went downhill. And I remember waking up when a couple years into it and not wanting to get out of bed in the morning because it just wasn't a fun place to go to anymore. And that was kind of a weird feeling for me, because I was the co-founder of the company, and if I myself didn't want to go into the office, then I started thinking about, well, how must the other employees feel? So that's actually why we ended up selling the company to Microsoft in 1998, so a little over 10 years ago. And so because I'm no longer involved with Link Exchange, I actually, for Loic, am presenting him with this logo, because there's the little web over here, and he can use the Link Exchange logo to make it Le Web, make it a little bit fancier. So after selling the company to Microsoft, the roommate and I, then we ended up not working together anymore, and Alfred and I got together and formed an investment fund called Venture Frogs, and we invested in about 20 or so different internet companies, and Zappos just happened to be one of those internet companies. And over a course of a year or so, I realized that investing was actually really boring. I really missed being part of building something, so I eventually joined Zappos full-time, and I've been with Zappos ever since. So a little bit about our sales. We started out with 0 sales in 1999, and over the course of the past 10 years, we grew sales to over $1 billion in gross merchandise sales in 2008. And the #1 driver of that growth has been through repeat customers and word of mouth. And we really focus on the customer service and the customer experience at Zappos. And our whole philosophy is take most of the money that we would have spent on marketing, on paid marketing or paid advertising, instead put it back into the customer experience and let our customers do the marketing for us through word of mouth. And on any given day, about 75% of our orders are from repeat customers. But the #1 priority in the company is actually not customer service. Our #1 priority is company culture. And our whole belief is that if we get the culture right, then most of the other stuff, like delivering great customer service or building a long-term, enduring brand, will just happen naturally on its own. So over here, you'll see some of the things that we do to help build our culture. We have 5 weeks of training that everyone goes through, and we train them on how to talk to customers, and they're actually on the phone taking calls from customers. It doesn't matter what your position is. You can be an accountant or a software developer or a lawyer. You go through the exact same training that our customer service people go through, because our whole belief is that if we really want to build our brand to be about the very best customer service, then customer service shouldn't just be a department. It should be the entire company. We also do things like have a culture book, which I'll make freely available to all the web participants, and I'll give the information for getting that later on. And if you go to twitter.zappos.com, you can see a link where we have over 500 employees that are on Twitter, and that's a good way of building up our culture over at Zappos. So for 2009 and 2010, probably for the next couple years, our focus on building the brand at Zappos is really to focus on the 3 C's. And for us, that's clothing, customer service, and culture. And for us, it's really about the life cycle of the customer. For customers that have never heard of Zappos before, we want to make sure that they understand we have a large selection of clothing. For once they know that we have a large selection of clothing and shoes, then we want to make sure that they understand that the Zappos brand is all about delivering the very best customer service and customer experience. And that's not something that we tell them so much as something that they experience when they call our call center, for example, or we give them surprise upgrades to overnight shipping, or they experience the free shipping both ways and see how easy it is to buy clothing or shoes from us. And then once they know that we're all about the best customer service, then we want them to know about our company culture and our core values, because that's really the platform that makes all of that possible. I'm going to go a little bit into detail about why we came up with this whole philosophy. But really, we've had customers tell us that when they receive a Zappos box, and they're surprised because it got there so quickly, that they think of Zappos as happiness in a box. So whether it's the happiness that they feel by getting the perfect outfit or the perfect pair of shoes, or the happiness that they feel by experiencing the surprise upgrades to overnight shipping, or the interacting with our customer service team, or the happiness that our employees feel by being part of a culture that they really believe in, where it's not just about working with coworkers, but it's about working with people that feel like friends and family. The thing that we realize that ties all of these things together is that Zappos is really just about delivering happiness, whether it's to customers or employees, and we apply the same philosophy to vendors as well. So one thing I want to talk about is these 2 books that we really have our employees read, and it's part of both books are part of the Zappos library. One is Good to Great by Jim Collins. The other is Tribal Leadership, which I would highly recommend. We actually partnered with the authors of Tribal Leadership, and the audiobook is downloadable for free from our Zappos website, so I would encourage you to get that. But both of these books looked at what separated the great companies, the companies that performed really well over the long term from a financial perspective, from just the companies that performed okay. And so we looked at these things as well, and they basically found there were 2 things that separated the great companies from just the good ones. And the first thing is culture. They found that companies that have really strong cultures do really well in the long term. And for us, we formalized the definition of our culture into 10 core values. Now, a lot of companies have things that they may call core values or guiding principles and so on. And I know for me, like when I was just getting involved in Zappos was just starting, I actually kind of resisted even thinking about core values because it seemed like it was one of those big company corporate things to do. But if I had to do Zappos all over again, one of the things I would do differently is actually start with core values from day one. We actually didn't even think about core values till 5 or 6 years into Zappos. That's one of the things I would do differently. But the key word here is committable core values, because a lot of companies, they have core values and so on, but they're all very lofty sounding. They sound like something that the marketing department put out in a press release, and maybe you learn about it on day one of orientation, but then it's just a meaningless plaque on the wall. And for us, we wanted to come up with values that we could commit to, and by committing to, meaning that we would actually be willing to hire and fire people based on. So these are the Zappos core values, and we actually have interview questions for each and every one of these core values. When we hire people, we actually do 2 different sets of interviews. The hiring manager and his or her team will do the standard, look for fit within the team, relevant experience, technical ability, and so on. But then our HR department does a separate set of interviews purely for culture fit. and we want to make sure that they pass both before they're hired. So we actually pass and don't hire a lot of really smart, talented people that we know can make an immediate impact on the top or bottom line, but if they're not a culture fit, we won't hire them. Now, a lot of companies, if they interview someone, they may not be a culture fit, but then they'll get trapped into thinking, okay, this person is really smart, can make an immediate impact on the top or bottom line, and then, but they might annoy some people, might not get along with some people at some points, but we should still hire them. And that, one hire isn't going to bring the company culture downhill, but you keep making compromises like that over and over and over again. And I think that's why most large companies don't have great cultures, and I think that's why for the company that I had previously been involved in, Link Exchange, why that culture went downhill and for me just was not a fun place to work at anymore. And so one comment we get a lot from a lot of corporations is, okay, that's great, glad you have this great culture at Zappos, but it would never work at my company. And what's interesting is that if you look at Good to Great and tribal leadership, what they found in studying all the different companies is that it actually does not matter what your values are. What matters is that you have them and that you actually commit to them. And by committing them, meaning that you're willing to actually hire and fire people based on them. And the second thing that both books found that separated the great companies from just the good ones is having a vision, having something that's beyond just money or profits or being number one in a market. I get asked a lot of times, especially at entrepreneur conferences, entrepreneurs will come up to me and ask, oh, what's a good business to go into where I can make a lot of money? And kind of the ironic thing is, and my advice to them is actually don't go in with the mindset of making a lot of money. Instead, figure out what you're actually passionate about, and that's what you should be doing. Because if you're actually passionate about it, then the ironic thing is, if you chase the vision, then the money will actually follow. And you think about websites like Craigslist, for example. Craig didn't go out trying to make a lot of money from it. He was just passionate about the community he was trying to build. And over time, it became one of the top trafficked websites because customers or users or anyone involved with the company can sense the true passion of the company. And this is supported by the research as well, if you read Good to Great or Tribal Leadership, is that there's always something, there's always a higher purpose beyond just money or profits or being number one in the market. And that's actually what will eventually make your company better in the long term. So I like to say, don't chase the money, chase the vision, not the money. There's a movie called Notorious that came out a couple years ago, and in it, Puff Daddy says to Biggie Smalls, who's also another rapper, don't chase the paper, chase the dream. Now, I just wanted an excuse to put this picture up here, because I think it's a funny picture. But, if you're an entrepreneur, I really want you to think about what would you be so passionate about doing that you'd be happy doing it for 10 years, even if you never made a dime? And if you have employees, think about what's the larger vision and greater purpose in your employees' work beyond just money or profits or being number one in the market? Because there's a lot of consultants and books on how to motivate employees, and you can motivate them through a lot of different ways. You can motivate them through incentives. You can motivate them through, a lot of companies use fear. A lot of companies use recognition. But what the research has shown and what we found at Zappos works really well is that there's a huge difference between motivation and inspiration. And if you can inspire your employees through a greater purpose or vision that goes beyond just money or profits or being number one in market, if you can inspire your employees through core values where the corporate core values actually match their personal core values, then you can accomplish so much more with your employees. And you don't really need to worry about the motivation part of it. So one thing I wanted all of you to think about is really take a step back from all of this. We're all in this conference together thinking about how do you make great startup companies. But if you take a step back and really just think about what is your goal in life. And what's interesting is that if you ask a lot of people this question, you'll get all sorts of different answers. Some people say, well, my goal in life is to grow a company or get a job or get a boyfriend or girlfriend. So think about whatever your answer is and then ask yourself, why? Why is it that you're pursuing whatever your goal in life is? And then you'll get, depending on who you ask, you'll get different answers. Some people say, well, so I can find a soulmate, so I can make money, so I can retire early, and then ask yourself, why again? And if you ask yourself why again, then you'll get all sorts of different answers from different people, because some people want to get married, some people want to buy a home, and just keep asking yourself why. And if you keep asking why enough times, what's interesting is that everyone actually eventually winds up with the same answer. And the answer is because they believe that whatever they're pursuing will eventually bring them happiness. So I thought this was pretty interesting, and I started thinking about this a couple years ago as I was going through all the different things that I was involved in my life. And one of the things, as I started reading more articles and books about this whole science of happiness, is that people are actually very bad at predicting what will actually make them happy in the long term. Most people think, okay, once I get this, then I'll be happy, or once I achieve this, then I'll be happy, or once my company gets to this level of revenue, then I'll be happy. But what the research has shown is that most people are actually very bad at this, and there's been so many studies of lottery winners, for example. You look at their happiness level right before winning the lottery and look at their happiness level a year later, and a year later it's about the same or maybe even a little bit lower. So I thought this was interesting, and I remember thinking, okay, there's all this science behind the business part of things that I'm working on, like whether it's conversion, new customer acquisition, repeat customer behavior, and so on. What if, and I don't know what the right percentage is, but what if you spent some percentage of your time just thinking and learning a little bit about the research that's been done already about the science of happiness? A lot of people go through life trying to go, they spend years and years going through all these things to eventually get to that happiness. What if by studying the science of happiness, you could take a shortcut and just go straight to the happiness and avoid a lot of the unnecessary work? So I thought that was pretty interesting. So I just wanted to share some of the stuff I've learned over the past couple years as I've read all these different books and articles about different frameworks of happiness, so that this can actually help yourself, not only in your personal life, but in business as well, when thinking about how do you make customers happy or how do you make employees happy. So one framework is that happiness is really just about 4 things: perceived control, perceived progress, connectedness, and vision or meaning, being part of something bigger than yourself. And so with this framework, if you have all 4 of those things, then people can be happy. And what's really cool is you can actually apply this not only to your own life, but to business as well. So for employees, for example, at Zappos, we found that giving perceived progress, for example, we used to hire people in our merchandising team, entry level, and then they get trained and so on, and then every 18 months, they would get a promotion. Well, after looking at this framework of happiness, what we realized was that instead of every 18 months giving them a promotion, we started giving them smaller promotions every 6 months. So after 18 months, they were at the exact same place as before, but they had this ongoing sense of perceived progress, and we found that that made our employees much happier. Another framework is Maslow's hierarchy. There's a great book called Peak, P-E-A-K, by Chip Conley, where he actually takes Maslow's hierarchy, condenses it into 3 levels, and applies it to employees and investors and customers as well. So as an example, the 3 levels for employees are for employees to think of their work as not as a job, not as a career, but as a calling. And so we take that philosophy and apply it at Zappos as well. And so the only way that we know that employees will still be with Zappos 10 years from now are if they are continually growing and learning, both personally and professionally. So we provide a lot of training and mentorship for our employees so that they will think of their work as a calling, not just as something that's career building and not just as a job. And then the third framework I want to share is that there's 3 types of happiness: pleasure, engagement, and meaning. And what the research has shown is that the first type of happiness is the shortest lasting type of happiness. And I like to call it the rock star happiness because it's all about chasing the next high. And it's great as long as you can sustain it, but what the research has shown is that as soon as the source of stimuli or whatever's making you happy goes away, your happiness level just drops right back down to where it was before. The second type is called flow. There's a book by the same name where it's really about those moments when 3 hours pass, but you're so engaged in something that it seems like only 20 minutes have passed. And so for professional athletes, they refer to it as being in the zone. And for different people, it's different things. For some people, it might be painting, or for other people, it might be running. But really, everyone experiences flow, and really the strategy there is if you want to maximize your flow, then you just notice when it happens and then either change your environment or your friends or your job or where you live to have that type of thing happen more often. And that's the second longest lasting type of happiness. And the third type is about meaning or higher purpose, or being part of something bigger than yourself. And for some people, that might mean volunteering for your favorite charity, for example. And what the research has shown is that that's actually the longest lasting type of happiness. And so the interesting thing is most people go through life chasing after the first type of happiness and then thinking, okay, once I can achieve that on a consistent basis, then I'm going to work on the second type of happiness. And then if I ever get around to it, then I'm going to work on the third type. But based on the research and the data from the research, the proper strategy is actually to focus on the third type of happiness. Once you have that, layer on top the second type of happiness, and then once you have that, then the first type of happiness is really just icing on the cake. So some books I recommend, probably the book that has made the biggest impact on me over the past 5 years, it's called Happiness Hypothesis, and it looks at the whole bunch of different religions and cultures and philosophers from all different time periods, and each of them has a different idea of what happiness actually is or means. But then the author compares it with actual scientific research that's been done and then either agrees or disagrees with different parts of what those different cultures or philosophers or religions believe. And my email, you can email ceo@zappos.com for a copy of this presentation, so in case you missed writing down anything. We also have a culture book. It's a physical book, and we're happy to send out to anyone at Le Web for free. Just make sure to include your physical mailing address because it's a physical book. And if any of you are ever in Las Vegas, I encourage you to come take a tour of our offices. We give tours to the public, and I think it's a really great chance for you to see what it's like when you have a culture where everyone's personal values actually match the corporate core values, because you can accomplish so much more when everyone is on the same page and moving in the same direction. So, I talked about how great businesses in general are ones that can combine profits, passion, and purpose. And then through the science of happiness research, I think it's really interesting that it's about being able to combine pleasure, passion, and purpose. So these are really fractals of each other. Like what makes an individual happy will actually make for good business: pleasure, passion, purpose, and profits, passion, and purpose. So just want to leave you guys with thinking about, what % of your time do you want to spend just learning about the research that's already been done about the science of happiness, and think about how can the science of happiness help yourself and your brand and your business or your company. If all the research has shown that having vision, meaning higher purpose, from a company perspective actually leads to the company becoming a great business in the long term, and having vision, meaning higher purpose, leads to your own personal happiness, just want to leave you with thinking about what is your company's higher purpose and what is your own higher purpose. I'm not up here trying to sell another pair of shoes or another outfit, but if you've been inspired to make your customers happier by focusing more on customer service, or make your employees happier by focusing more on company culture, or even just make yourself happier by learning a little bit about the science of happiness, then I'll have done my part in helping Zappos fulfill our higher purpose, which is just about delivering happiness to the world. Thank you very much.
Wow. Wow. Tony, you're such a source of inspiration. So since you asked, the purpose of Le Web is not to be an event. It's to create a force for entrepreneurs to create more, and I'm sure you have inspired so many today. So thank you so much, Tony.